Hi everyone, this is Derek Harp, the founder and chairman of the Control Systems Cybersecurity Association International, or as we call it, just CSA. CSA is a 501c6 nonprofit workforce development association dedicated to helping grow, support, and sustain the professionals charged with the cybersecurity of control systems. We're specifically talking about those systems that have pumps and valves and actuators, real cyber to physical moving parts, and control nearly every aspect of our modern connected industries. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. It is my hope you find it inspirational or motivating or revealing or informative, and perhaps at times even a little entertaining. Take care and be well.
Hey everybody, Derek Harp here, founder and chairman of CSA and host of the CSA podcast show. I've got another fantastic guest on today. I have Dr. Jesus Molina, Director of Industrial IoT at Waterfall Security Solutions. He is a known OT cybersecurity thought leader and a longtime cybersecurity practitioner. If you don't know him, he is a technologist, he's an inventor, he is an all-around curious individual, he's a copious reader, he is an electrical engineer, he's got a master's and Ph.D. in fact in electrical engineering, he's a researcher, a sailor, a traveler, a public speaker, an educator, and all around very passionate about cybersecurity and cybersecurity for IoT and OT. And welcome to the show, Jesus.
Hi Derek, I love your intros. It makes you feel so good about yourself. It's like, oh wow.
Well, that's the idea, you know, is showcase you individuals out there that are doing amazing things and have been for a long time. I mean, you've been in cybersecurity for more than 2 decades, and
well, all my life actually, like since I was 9. We can discuss about this in a second.
Well, this is good. We're going to go. Let's go right there. So I always joke that you know, sort of, I have a couple things I always say in every interview, right? That superheroes and cybersecurity people, you know, the modern day superheroes. So superheroes all have a backstory, and I'm waiting for one of you to say that it was some kind of lightning bolt and a vat of industrial waste, and that's how you became who you are today. But usually it's a little more.
Well, for me, it was more, I started to be a super villain, and then I turned to superhero. So let's go. And I will try to be candid, but maybe I'll change the names and the situations a bit.
So where'd you grow up?
I think has enough time passed that I can tell things. You know?
Yeah. There's a statute of limitations, I think, on some of that. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I was born in Ciudad Real, which is in La Mancha, which probably people don't know it is in Spain, and people that know it is for Don Quixote, the book, you know, the Men of La Mancha, Don Quixote book. So this is where I was born, and all my family. If you go to my 23andMe, you will see I'm a pure breed Spanish person. It's 100% Spanish. It's pretty intense. I will say that if there is like a murder and they say the Spanish guy did it, because they found my DNA.
You're in Madrid today, correct? That's home.
No. Like my life has been like moving everywhere. So I was born in Ciudad Real. Then I moved to Tarragona, which is in Catalonia. That's where I did my high school. And then I moved when I was like 20 to Washington, D.C., actually to College Park, Maryland, when I did my Ph.D. And then I moved to San Francisco. And in San Francisco, I stayed for another 10 years or something like that. But really, I was in San Francisco in and out. I was in Japan. I was in China. I was in Colombia. I was in many different places. And now I am back in Barcelona, near Barcelona, a beautiful town, one of the most beautiful towns in the world for me is called Sitges. It's like 20 kilometers south from Barcelona, near the sea, and now I'm seeing the sea. Very beautiful place.
I forgot your Silicon Valley days because we were neighbors practically. I mean, there's a lot of us, 8-9 million people, I think, in the greater area there. But I was there 2000. I lived there 2006 for 10 years or so, and I think. So we were there somewhere.
We meet at Burning Man.
It's possible. So you said early on in your life there's an interest in computers and maybe more. What's that spark? What happened?
Well, like I got my first computer when I was, I think, 9. It was an Spectrum 48K. I don't know if you're familiar with the Spectrum Sinclair. It was this computer where you need a tape in order to play the game. So you obviously press play, and then you're like, it was like listen to music, and when the music ended, you have the game. So I got interested, and that's the first time cybersecurity came to be, because in order to get games, I was a very poor kid. Well, not poor, but like, I mean, I have enough to eat, but not enough to buy games, or my family had enough to buy games. So in order to buy games, you actually have to go to a newspaper, which was only microcoded, because it's called games. And then you will find somebody that wanted to exchange games. And then you record your games, send it in the mail, and then you will get back 20 games or something. And then you will use these 20 games to buy. Obviously, that's pirating, not proud of it. But that's when I started to say, because some of these games started to have little things, glitches, So you cannot do that. So if you try to tape it, it will not work. So you started to just like tape the tape so you can like, you started to go in the mindset of like, how can I overcome the fact that these people are trying to just avoid me to play my game. So that was my first touch in cybersecurity in a way.
And that planted some real seeds for you. It's it's been a theme, like you said, for the rest of your life. I have a similar early background, and it was 5 1/4 diskettes, and taking a paper hole punch and learning that if I punched on the other side where the notch was, it was suddenly double-sided without having to pay for a double-sided disc. It was already double-sided. You just need to tell the sensor, this one, now you can write to the other side of this thing. So yeah, I love all those early discoveries.
Yeah, the early discoveries, and you do because you're in need, and that's that happened to me again in high school. Like again, you understand that there was no internet or anything. It was these computers in high school when I was like 14. Was the next discovery of computers, which was the PCs, which didn't have Windows, have Dr. Tier DOS and framework and all these things. And I was part of the lab, and I was in my freshman year there, and I was typing, and suddenly the things start falling down. So you start typing, and when you type, all the letters started falling down to the bottom of the screen. And I was like, what is this? This is amazing. Everybody was like, oh no, what's going on? Everything is destroyed. I was like, this is amazing. Who is doing this? And the guy told me, oh, it's a virus. It's like, what's a virus? It's like, yeah, it's things that like get into your computer and modify to do weird things. It's called Cascade. It's a virus. Now we have to go and use this antivirus. Like, what's an antivirus? It's like something you put in the computer called McAfee. And I'm like, the first thing, and that's the first thing that came to my mind, is like, I want to do a virus. I want to do exactly that. This is what I want to do.
It is a profession. It looks like you decided to use your powers for good, but that is a profession. Obviously, it keeps us all busy. There's plenty of people that go that path.
Well, like actually, I spent like 6 months researching on how to do a virus, and obviously I researched of my magazines and everything, and it was really difficult. You have to know assembly. You have to go around floppy disks to put the virus, and you have to infect the master boot record. And I learned how to do it, and I tried. But the guy that was like the senior guy was in charge of like using the McAfee, the computers after that Cascade incident, always find all the viruses, right? So I did like the stupid stuff, but he always find it, I try to infect, and like he always find me, But that's the next year, one day in my high school, all the computers appear like with viruses. All the computers, every computer was infected, not one or two, all of them. They have never seen something like this. I will not say who was behind it. I know it's very close to me. So, and everybody was trying, like the guys started to like run the McAfee and try to find how we can be infected from this virus, which is a name, which was the name of the town we were in, it was Tarragona virus. And he was unable to. So after 2 weeks, he found out how this virus was made. And can you take a guess, Derek, probably you, like how a person with no understanding much of how viruses work and have failed to make a virus many times before was able to infect every computer of his high school, which by the way, the lab was down for a week because of that. So take a shot. How did this guy, this persona, this super villain?
Do tell.
Do tell. So going back like in a movie of Agatha Christie, I told you the guy was cleaning up every morning, every computer using the McAfee, all right? So what this guy did is he found the lock where the McAfee antivirus was stored. He opened the McAfee, like the disks, got all the disks, found the disks that had the signatures of all the viruses that was sent every month. He put a tape, which it was used to, you can re-record these disks, as you said before. If you put a little like tape, we record the antivirus signatures and added one more, which is Tarragona, with a very common string that was in most executables. Not in all, because he tried before to see how this worked. So what happened is that is what we call a supply chain attack. You don't attack the actual computers, you attack the program that is used to clean the computers. Actually, if the guy has been smarter, he will actually have used his computers to actually install an actual virus. because they were passed every day. But what's interesting is that when you created something like this, and this is a shootout to everybody that tries to do something evil because you wanted to do mischief, and you thought everybody will find it so fast. This person, when he did that, he thought everybody will know that it's the antivirus who has the virus. I mean, it's just like obvious. Who can infect 30 computers at the same time? But in the moment of a crisis, people don't think about that. People always are in crisis mode. So what they think is switch off the computer. Let's switch off the computer. So some people try to do mischief and they don't understand the consequences, because in the moment of a crisis, people act very randomly, and you as an attacker sometimes want to do a little bit of bad, and bad things happen, very bad things happen. I was called into the office of my high school, and it says like, I'm sure you did it. I never said I did it. Just like, because like, who else could do that? And it's like, well, anybody could do it, which I don't understand is like how the person that was in charge of the antivirus didn't protect it better. And I don't understand how didn't he know at the beginning, because I mean, it's, so anyway, so at the end of the day, you have to see this. Sometimes mischief turns into really bad with the knowledge of the person that has the mischief, that wanted to do a prank and like escalated quickly.
I love it. That's a great formative story. And supply chain now is, I mean, like you said, that is exactly that's many years ago. And supply chain is quite the discussion today about poisoning something along the way. So, what was the college choice of Washington D.C. in electrical engineering? What went into that?
I was a very good student in high school, like the smartest of my class. But when I went to university, I was not that, because I was in more. University took me all in, like the partying and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, student. But I befriended the chair of my department, and he said, Jesus, you will do good in the US. Don't know why. Because actually my English was okay. I mean, it was horrendous, actually. Now my English is okay. Back then it was horrendous. But he, compared to others, it was better. It's like, there is a program that can make you go to the last part of your year to the US and do your master's there. I'm like, that's great. So I was selected to do that. And it was a cultural shock, because it was totally different. First, I went with no money. And in Spain, you can live quite well with no money. In the US, you cannot live quite well with no money. You need a car. I remember like in College Park, walking on the middle of the 101, and people throwing me like food, because I'm just like, things that in Spain is like, I don't know, so it was a shock. And I started my degree there. And I was basically almost kicked out a couple of times because I didn't know much English. And my professor, one of my mentors, Virgin Grigor, told me, which I will remember, there are people that are meant for doing a master's. There are people that are meant to do a Ph.D. You are meant to do neither of these. It's like, okay. So I was like, well, I can try. And I did try, and there was another professor called William Arbaugh, which gave me one chance. It's like, if you are the best of my class, and his class was with the best of cybersecurity at University of Maryland, I will give you a grant, and you can obviously pay all your debts and all that stuff. And I did, and I was the best of the class. So I'll tell you the story. I was the best of the class. That's another story, but like, and he gave me a grant, and I stayed there, and I decided after that to do my PhD there. So that's how I stayed at College Park, and I did my master's and my PhD.
That's awesome. And how did you choose? I don't know if you mentioned electrical engineering.
Well, it was in Spain we had something called telecomunicaciones, which is a kin of electrical engineering. Here in Spain, we're more about. It's because Telefónica here is a big company, is more about communications. So, yeah. But it was a similar program. So that's how I moved from one program to that program.
Okay.
But again, it was very different in the scope. Again, when I arrived to a master's, it's totally different than Spanish. In Spain, there is a lot of value in the exam. So people study for the exams. In the US, there's a lot of value on projects you do. And I was definitely not used to work in projects more with people. For me, it was surprising that I have to work with other people, right? So it was just insane. So actually, one of the project that William Arbaugh told me was I have to hack and decrypt the Intel macrocode, which is this microcode that goes into every Intel chip and modifies the behavior of the chip itself, and it's encrypted with a public-private key. So I did that kernel module, like whatever. But again, I had to work with others, and it was complicated for me because I was working with people that knew all about Linux, and I learned a lot about Linux and like how to work with different drivers, and I built the driver for the microcode for Linux. So I did a lot of stuff there. It was forced into me because I had to work with others, which is very important. It's one of the lessons. Is that sometimes you can work by yourself or you can work with others, and it's important to know how to do both.
So any story from that before we leap off to what you went off and did first? Anything from those years that you think people might find interesting or inspirational? Is there a decision or a choice you made that even today you're like, man, right then I made that's a pivotal moment in my, in my career path?
There was two pivotal moments. First, that's where I built my first patent, and I was kind of screwed with it because my professor, William Arbach, actually made that of a company out of it and make out of money, and I didn't get any of the money because I was not part of the company. But I signed off my patent because I was a young student, and he told me, be careful what you sign, and I did sign out of my patent. But anyway, that's what I'm saying is that sometimes when you're young, you're very trusting, and that's something you learn. But what I built there with William Arbach was this, the patent work in 2016 is an intrusion detection system, but in hardware. So basically it was a PCI board that you plug into your computer and it will check your memory and your hard drive, but without the intervention of the operating system. So basically we'll use the PCI bus to download modules from memory and download parts of the drive itself, the blocks, and it will evaluate them. So hackers could not have any chance. You go to the computer and you have a chance to do that. That's one thing. It was very interesting to me because I have to work with hardware, actually use what board would call EBSTA 285. That was an ARM processor, so you have to install Linux in ARM, and I have to code ARM. So it was really interesting, and the concept is really sound. And after that was my master's thing. And after that, I did my Ph.D., which was on evaluating intrusion detection systems. And perhaps the biggest lesson I learned there is that I created all these honeypots. So I put like 100, I think, honeypots, and I could capture all the information that all these bad people did and try to evaluate them, right? And the honeypots were very special because I did it in a way where they have like 3 levels of monitoring. And one was created by me using a kernel model. So I detected, I think it was 800 intrusions. And I make all these big mathematical models. But there was one thing that escaped me. There was one person, only one, and that was able to disable my first monitoring system, my second monitoring system, and my third monitoring system. And there was no reason for him to do that because at some point he knew that was a honeypot. I mean, at some point you're a hacker, you disable the first kernel module, the third module, and you're like, this obviously is a computer from a university. I mean, this obviously it's a honeypot. But he's like, you know what? I'm going to mess up with this researcher. I'm going to try to tamper. He tampered with my logs. He tampered with the virtual machine. So what you learn is IDSs are good, but it's only if one person escapes your net, then you're screwed anyway. I mean, it doesn't matter if you capture 799. My thesis could be IDSs really doesn't work because I capture 799 and that's what they do. But this guy, just is screwed with my IDS. So what can I say? It's just IDSs sometimes doesn't work, and that time can ruin your thesis or your company or everything. So that's something I learned in that times. Actually, I never put that in my dissertation. So it's another thing maybe to have. I said that everything was fine. We saw all these different activities and evaluate and move on. It's all right, just let's say there was somebody that it was in the lab and that's it.
Oh man, what a great story! I can just try to imagine you reading through all the logs. What is this person doing?
Why and why? Because you know that he came back one time after another from different IP addresses. You can tell because he was continuing. There was 800. Obviously, 800 means 800 different IP addresses, but some of them were coming from different IP addresses, but were the same. And some of them were I would say 90%, 95% were dumb, hackers. Just they run things that are normal. They just press a button and use whatever Kali or whatever they were using back then. And then there were 5% that were smarter. I mean, you can tell they were typing things and trying things. And there was one that was fucking genius and actually a lot of time in his hands. Why would you do that? here, like I tried to put two things together, and I saw that he logged in from different IP addresses like 15 times until he actually was able to disable my threat, and I don't know what to do after that. Actually, I was unable to. I had to shut down that whole machine and I move somewhere else because after that, obviously, everything can be screwed by this guy doing things all the time. So anyway, so you learn the hard way that like bad guys, sometimes you don't think they have incentives to do bad things, but then sometimes they are just, you know what, I will do it anyway. Have to be careful.
I love it. So you've done a lot of things between then and Waterfall. You were at Fujitsu. You started out with them. You've been a researcher. You've been your own consulting business for some years. You've been at Jade Brain, your industrial. You've also volunteer positions. That's probably something to talk about. I see Industrial Internet Consortium, and I know I saw earlier Trusted Computing Group, one of the board chairs. So, and ultimately now at Waterfall for 6 years, along that line, what's any stories, leading up to where you are today that sort of, you've got more so than most, some people like when did industrial or when did control related systems come into play in cybersecurity? You've got those themes very, very early, pretty much, right away. You were working with hardware and cybersecurity, and you're not, it's not later converging into your path as it is for some people who may be working traditional IT cyber, and suddenly they're looking at control systems. But did your engineering background and the nature of evolving of control systems the last couple of years, when did that become more of your focus? Today, obviously, that's your area, is the industrial and control and operating technology side of the house. When did that really get going?
So in Fujitsu Laboratories is the research brand of Fujitsu, right? And they hired me right after my PhD because I was working with them, in a project with William Arbau or something I was working with. So I was hired there as a researcher and they really liked me, so they continued. And I was in a weird situation because I didn't want to leave my PhD because of, again, long story, but I was paid very well to be a student. And I was doing another PhD on Spanish literature at the same time. I decided that there were like more fun in that department than in electrical engineering. So, but I was hired by them, and then I started doing very cool research projects because Fujitsu Laboratories work a little bit like a startup. So you basically will do a project, and then you will send it to Japan. Japan's like, do you like this? And they were like, yeah, or oh no. So I was in Japan all the time going, and we did a wireless wallet, which was like a payment system back then, which a device we created. So it was a really cool payment system. I have a patent on a payment system on that. We did a lot of things about cloud. One of the first information about clouds, we have a paper, which is like cybersecurity in cloud, which is a seminal paper we wrote with the people of, now I cannot remember the lab, but one famous lab there in Silicon Valley. So we did a lot of like cool projects with Fujitsu. One of the coolest projects I remember is we had to hack smart meters.
Hey everybody, Derek Harp here, and I just want to take a brief moment to thank 3 companies that make this podcast series possible. The first company is Waterfall Security Solutions, and they led the charge this year for the podcast, and they specifically sponsored it from their podcast, the Industrial Security Podcast. So check that out. That's a great linkage to an entire other series of over 100 episodes. They had their anniversary recently, focused on control system cybersecurity, and they were supported this year by KPMG and Fortinet. We could not do this without them. These companies not only have supported this podcast series this year, but they've supported CSAE since its very early days 8 years ago. And we're entirely grateful to the teams and dedicated professionals at Waterfall Security Solutions, KPMG, and Fortinet.
So they give us all these, like meters work at like at 220 volts. So you have to use a special place to just evaluate them and stuff, And I was able to find, like they give it to us, to Fujitsu basically, and we have to evaluate it. I cannot tell you what company hired, but I was able to actually find something which is really cool that nobody knows, or not know if it still exists, but that company had a code that was hidden that I was able to disable the smart meter remotely. And that was made hiddenly, so if somebody, at some point, there was a change of the laws, you could actually press a button and switch off the lights of people because they didn't pay or something like that. So it was interesting because sometimes you are researching something and then you are stumbled on this and it's like, should I bring this? Because like that's bad for my business. If I say, hey, I found this and that's not good for you guys, but sometimes you're like in these, when you do this like pen testing, sometimes you find things and you're like, no. So at some point, going to the conduits, I decided that I had enough information, I would say, from Fujitsu Laboratories, which like, again, I have very good mentors there, Ryusuke Masuoka, for example. And also Fujitsu used me a lot to be part of the standardization agencies, to present them there in the Trusted Computing Group, which Fujitsu Laboratories, Fujitsu as a whole was part of it at the beginning, at the very start, when they designed the Trusted Platform Module. I don't know if you remember what the Trusted, well, you know what the Trusted Platform Module is, right? So back then we built the specs for that in 2007. That's when we finished the specs of the TPM 1.1 and TPM 1.2, I don't know what. And then we did, and there's a good story about this. The story is about the TPM. The Trusted Platform Module, when I was part of this standardization agency, was supposed to be in every computer. And we were so successful that the TPM was in every computer. But that was in 2007, and only until today, people started working on it. And the reason behind this is one professor said, the TPM is a nightmare for privacy, because now they can track you down anywhere you go. They can tell what computer it's you with absolute precision. So what we did as a Trusted Computing Group was too nice, and what we said as a group, said like, you know what, let's make it disabled by default. And also we'll make anonymization protocol called TCSS or something like that. It was amazing. People there, they were some of the biggest brains on computers in the Trusted Computing Group. And because of that, nobody turned it on, and nobody used it for years and years and years, so much that like they took it off most computers. And now I think because Windows started using it, it's back on. But it's interesting that anonymity right now is something so vague. Everybody's in Facebook saying, but that was pre-Facebook. And back then, anonymity was really important. And this professor was very strict. I said, like, I'm going to bury your TPM if you don't disable by default. And we did. If we haven't done it, I think we'll have a totally different internet, because we're talking about 2007 or something like this. I mean, you have been, every computer has a different kind of keys, and everybody has a person that is in the TPM, but because that didn't, we disable by default, then nobody used it. So it's interesting how standards can change things, or standards are sometimes too nice and like miss the chance because of that. And again, I think TPM is impressive, the work we did back then, and probably the work we are still doing.
And that strikes me as that conundrum for cybersecurity professionals, which is we can't always do everything we might want because of the realities, and anonymity is one, or sort of confidentiality or whatever you want to call it, privacy. But running the business is number one. And so security has to sort of fit within these things. So that was an unintended consequence of what it sounds like very early, pretty smart engineering that couldn't fully be adopted. So it didn't mean it didn't work. In fact, you're saying, hey, this thing would have been great, but it didn't fit the norm. It wasn't implementable by most people, or they weren't willing to. I wonder how much frustration, all my years that I've been involved in this industry, I've sensed this frustration with many cybersecurity people. It's like, oh, if we could just do, it's not they can't see the path forward, but it's got to operate with business and people's resistances and all these other chess pieces on the board besides cybersecurity.
Well, look at the software bill of materials, which right now everything is trumpeting us like, oh my God, we just discovered this, and like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like when we did the TPM, the first concept of TPM is not like a trusted boot, it's a measured boot. So you have to measure everything in the stack before you boot, and it's stored in registers called the PCRs inside the TPM. That's how the TPM works. And then you are locking that state. The keys can only be released if you have gone through that boot and all the measurements are correct, matches what is in the chip, and then you can actually work, right? So this is the concept. So in order to do that, every step of the boot process needs to be recorded, including the operating system. So why did we fail? Because nobody wanted to do that software bill of materials. Windows, our friends of Microsoft, we were part of the TPM, the Trusted Computing Group, did not include that as a part of the drivers. So if you stop at the level of the operating system, the TPM was only measuring the BIOS basically. So it was not very useful, really. I mean, it was like just like a key. So it was not very interesting. But now everybody's about the software bill of materials, when I think they will find the same problems we had back then, and it's that you can have a beautiful software bill of materials, but if you change like one part of that program and you try to evaluate it against like a repository, then that fails, and then it's a mess, and then what you do, and it's all false positives. So there are things that are, the old is new and the new is old, you know, something black, and it's like, I mean, back then we fought so much in Linux, we created the TSS, the Trackware, was a driver for Linux, and even Linux was like, I'm not very interested in that, because then we have to put everything that we put in every module that is loaded by the operating system, we need to measure it, and we have to track modifications, and it's just a pain. And I was like, ah. So yeah, I mean, this is what you're saying, like it's about a little bit of like usability versus what, you know, the right moment at the right time, you know, people have like a drive, but I mean, it's like IDSs for OT, you know, OT IDSs now are like, oh my God, it's like they have found cheese, you know, like, I mean, it's an IDS, like, but you actually look at things that are a little more different, but host IDSs, in IDSs were so big in 2007 that they didn't make a huge contest of which was the best IDSs. They made these huge databases with tags, you know, and you can run it in your thing. And this disappeared. There is not a way to evaluate IDSs or anything like this. Or I think they did it in Black Hat or DEFCON or maybe in S4. They did something like this, but it is going to be always a miserable, because everybody that loses is like, well, I lost because my IDS does this thing, but not this thing. So why? So it's all these tools that we see today, most of these software tools are very similar to the tools I was like looking at 2007. So nothing changed much in that front, but obviously evolved obviously, better and like.
Okay, let's talk control systems. People sometimes ask, you know, where are these industrial control systems? And so we, you know, at CSA, we dropped the word industrial many years ago and said anywhere there's physical elements. And almost every company, I would say now, the way I define it, every company has some exposure. Sure, an oil refinery is easy to manufacture or to conceive of all their control systems. But if you've got an elevator or an escalator, so even a hotel has control-related interfaces. And I understand you might know something about hotels and how they operate.
Yeah, it's my one. But first, I have done things that are out of screen time, you know, which were probably worse. Like worse. I mean, like I was more for a while. I was a great hat hacker, you know. Like I befriended a lot of good, actual bona fide black hat hackers in DEFCON, Black Hat, and all these places, and I learned quite a bit from them. There were some amazing like people there, and people that usually don't want to part of the spotlight. If you want to do something mischievous, you prefer somebody to take credit of it. But in this case, I did decide to take credit of it just because of different things. So basically what I was a host, I guess, in one hotel in China, in Shenzhen, the San Regis Shenzhen, a 5-star hotel, one of the most luxurious hotels I've ever been in my life. It's in the 20 last floors of a skyscraper in Shenzhen, the K100 building. And while I was in the hotel, I found an iPad. You know, the iPads, and I've never seen that before in a hotel, was able to control your room. Switch on the TV, you can switch on the, you know, open the blinds, change the channels, put music. You can do lots of things. Change the outside lights, which are relevant for the next thing I will tell you. So long story short, I decided to see how this worked because I was curious. So
see how these worked. I like that.
I said how this works because curiosity is like what put me in a lot of situations in my life. It's like, yeah, cool, let it go. And I had things to do. I was working for a Chinese company back then as a consultant.
I mean, curiosity, by the way, is a word that came up a lot as you've talked today in my head. As you think about your nature probably from the very, very beginning, that sounds like that's who you've been. And I'm picturing you in this hotel, like doing regular work during the day and like up all night doing this other work.
Exactly. Well, it was my birthday. So, well, it's a long story, but that was like my birthday. I had to work and I was kind of pissed off that I had to be in that beautiful hotel with no friends there and, you know, in a foreign country with like the most amazing pool you can imagine in the top floor. And you know, it's like the joke, no? if you find this supermodel in like in your island and you have never seen anybody, the first thing you can tell people when you see them is like, I was in an island with a supermodel, right? So it's the same thing. I was in a hotel and like I didn't have any friends to just share how beautiful this hotel is and how lucky I was to be there. So I spent the nights as like, and one night I was there for 5-6 days, I remember. And one night, I was looking, okay, I'm mesmerized about this iPad, how this works, how this iPad sends things to all these build, like all the room. So I put this like the Wireshark using, like I started listening to what this iPad was sending because it was also unplugged from anywhere, so it has to be wireless. And I started like getting all the traces of what was working on. And there was a protocol that actually I looked at in another project, was called KNX. So I was lucky enough. It's like, oh, I know these are telegrams from KNX, but these are building automated system, building management systems. So I was a little bit surprised that they use that to open lights. It means that this is bigger than just like the iPad talking with this room. So I started calling the hotel and telling them, hey, I don't like this room. Can you change me to another room? So they would change me to another room. And then I will collect the traces and compare. It's like, what are these different lights going on? And I started switching off lights and see if like I can see the traces, when I look, what were the telegrams sent to? So if they were different, they were the same, it was. So I started to compile after changing, I changed, and this is another trick I have to tell you, Derek. If you want to be in the best room of a hotel, call them 7 times and ask them to change their room like several times, and they will give you the best suite they have. They give me this incredible, like the presidential with like 3 levels. It was insane. I was like, and the funny thing is that room didn't have an iPad. It's the only room of the hotel. It's like, oh crap. I was like, well, can you? So yeah. So anyways, what I did is I collected this and I did a Python program which is able not to control only my room, which was my initial quest. Was I want to control my room with my iPad, my laptop. So I can do happy birthday using the light blinking, beep, 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 like the lights, I like the lights outside. But then I realized that you can control every room because all of them work through the same network. So if I press a button, I can actually raise all the blinds of all the rooms at the same time. I can switch on all the TVs at the same time because all there were like wireless to KNX, wired KNX and KNX to the whole thing. So everything was routed, so everything was like connected to everything. So I was able to control the whole building, and I tested it. I tested it by using the outside lights. So I make a little like round around the hotel where all the outside lights started to blink at the same time. Yeah, there's a way to record it without having to be in different rooms, more because I was stuck in the switch and I was not able to test it. So I was like, and telling them to change my room will look suspicious. It's like, look, we are in the best room. Well, you want to downgrade you to their room. But like an interesting part of this story is that it took me like 2.5 days to changing rooms, collecting all the information, understanding, creating a Python program and KNX. But you know what? I had all the traces of Wireshark that I collected, everything. I tried to do the same thing that I did back then, but using ChatGPT. So I feed ChatGPT exactly the same things I did back then, with the same knowledge more or less. Like, hey, Wireshark, like here's the Wireshark traces. What is this protocol I see here? It's like, oh, it's KNX. That was like ChatGPT telling me right away, hey, can you know what are these? They are telegrams and they are from different devices. Oh, interesting. All right. Can you make me a Python program that can connect with the different devices, like which is what I did. It took me like 1.5 days. Not only this, I give them like 2 traces from 2 different rooms, and you tell me. And the pattern was a little bit confusing because it was like jumped 50 numbers or something like that. And I give him 3 different traces of 3 different rooms. It's like, hey, there are 3 different devices, and they think there is a pattern here. Can you tell me the pattern for every room? It's like, oh yeah, it's exactly what I discovered after like. So ChatGPT did what I did in that hotel room for 1.5 days. Took me to full time almost. And he did it in like 10 minutes. Like, I mean, obviously you have to just like, I will have to check the Python program against the different devices to see it actually work. And, probably they have some mistakes. Yeah. They don't have the chance to do it today. But surprising is that ChatGPT, when it comes to offensive, when it comes to creating the payload and understanding patterns, is very good, is really good. It's not good, I think, to do penetration testing. But I think when it comes that you are inside, I think we're going to see an uptake on this because I was shocked that ChatGPT was so good, and realizing something, it took me, as an expert, it took me a little bit to realize and create the program. Some things you learn about this is, first, never talk with journalists. Kim Zetter interviewed me, which is a journalist that is amazing, she's great, and that was the good one. But I interviewed with many other journalists that were not good journalists. And I have a piece of NPR where I look like the biggest jerk in the world, say like, I control the whole hotel and blah, blah, blah. When I told her directly, don't use bytes, because the Starwood, which is now part of Hilton, was so nice with me, so nice. We could have like Zoom it, but it was super nice. Like, they put some ground rules, because I sent them a letter saying I did that in your hotel. They never replied to me. Then realized they received the letter, which was certified, and then apologized, but they said, excuse me. But anyway, we're super nice. But the only thing they asked me is like, please don't brag, please don't go around. And this lady put me, without my knowledge, in the NPR. You can still find it, NPR has Molina, talking about myself as I was the biggest shit in the world. Well, the piece was about how I could be liable for what I have done. Talking with a lawyer, it's like, this guy could be sentenced for what he has done, talking about me, while I was like bragging about hacking the hotel. She recorded me while we were drinking outside in a bar. So I was like, yeah, so one thing you learn. And then I started with comments like, Jesus, we heard the piece in NPR. Kind of tone it down a bit, and you. So be careful with journalists, because they are good ones, and there are ones that can really not so good. And they say, I called her and I said, oh, you were on the record. Yeah, but you told me that you will not do it. It's like, yeah, sorry. You're on the record. Everything you say.
Every guest has given some different gold nugget advice. This is a unique one that we're almost at 100 episodes and no one's brought this up. But if you're a security researcher, you're bringing up a very cautionary tale of being quite careful about what you say, especially to someone who's a journalist, because it can be twisted, right? It can be used in ways that you didn't intend. I mean, that is an amazing story.
You can end up in
That's something that all researchers can pay attention to, right?
Yes, because you can have like disclosure, but sometimes you do something, again, some mischief, that you believe is okay. More when the person, the people that you did the mischief to, this can Starwood, they're so good about it. I mean, they were good. They could have like shut it down or try to shut me down or something. And they were like, Jesus, obviously I was my lawyer when talking with them. It was not as easy as that, I had to hire a lawyer, and the lawyer talked with the lawyers, and everybody was happy. But if you talk too much with lawyer, the problem is how people spin it. The media is very good at cutting parts of what you said and put it in exactly, they have a narrative. The narrative of this lady was, if you are a gray hat hacker, you can go to jail. That was her narrative. That's what her piece wanted to do. So she found somebody in Black Hat that was not able to give the talk because the lawyers of the company that he hacked told him not to do it, and he decided not to do it. And then he put me, pitch it against it, and somebody which did talk in Black Hat is Jesus Molina. And so her narrative was clear from the beginning. The only thing they want from you is a soundbite, saying something they like to listen, and they will put that out of context, because what they said there was having a couple of wine, talking about something different, not the main interview at all. And I was like, but I did it, and I was on the record. So yes, again, be very careful when you talk with the press. Be very careful. Don't be naive, thinking that everybody's good. People can be amazing journalists like Kim Zetter, where they always are like, Jesus, this is what they're going to write. Jesus, be careful, Jesus, whatever. Yeah. And there are other journalists that are not that nice. So you see that in every, all these late night shows, there is always an idiot being interviewed who says something like, I don't know where Africa is in. You think it's the only person interviewed? You think this is the whole context? Yeah. I mean, if they want for you to look like an idiot, they will make you look like an idiot. They will first you sign all these documents saying I release all what I said, and then they will say, I'll cut it here. So,
well, yeah. As we wrap up, because you and I could go for hours. That's always the challenge with most of my guests. There's so much we could talk about. We'll just have to have you, come back and do another deep dive episode into one of your areas of research and passion. But what are you excited about the future, or not? I mean, do you see things that scare you in the future? Like we're headed to more trouble? Is it optimistic, pessimistic? What's your view of the future and what are you excited about?
I think we have to defend ourselves against AI. You have seen the movies. We are all okay with it, We are like, oh yeah, AI, whatever. We're like, it's like we're crazy, but like, I see the boots on the ground. What happened to me there in that hotel, and now I review it with AI in like 5 minutes. People are talking a little bit in a willy-nilly things of like penetration testing and blah blah blah. In OT, and my company, what it does is like what it called network engineering, I say, or like cyber-informed engineering. So it's like mixing a little bit cybersecurity with engineering. Like Waterfall, about it. That's universal gateways, which basically prevent physically any data to come into a system. Now, this matches a little bit of this. Two things are happening. First, attacks to systems with physical consequences are escalating, and Andrew Ginter has been in your chat saying this, so I will not go and rehash what he's saying. But what I'm saying from my own research is there's another piece of the puzzle, and is that Robert Lee, like 2016, he did this very seminal paper called the ICS cyber kill chain. That paper, right?
I know, Rob. Yeah.
And so he did. There was like two phases or stages: stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 is similar for IT and OT. It's as like somebody entering your system. Stage 2 is what happens in the OT system. And stage 2 is something that we've seen very few attacks which like really deliver in stage 2. We have seen in Destroyer a couple of the Ukraine things, Stuxnet, of course, which I don't, like 2010. But the payloads have been very, not very interesting. What I see is that using AI, and I've seen that with my own research on that hotel, AI, you can make payloads that are very fun, because what I don't tell you is I didn't tell you only to do the Python program to do that. I asked her or him or whatever this ChatGPT is, what other things I can do? And he told me, you can brick KNX devices. And you know what happened a year and a half ago, or recently, is that KNX lock has been used to brick devices in a building management system. And that's something that I didn't know. I didn't know the context. ChatGPT doesn't know what happened a year ago. And she told me exactly that. And she told me how to do it. So it's like, oh, you can go more than that. Or she told me more interesting things. So she started to tell me all these payloads and creating them for me, because he actually created payloads for me. It's like, okay, so I want now to, one thing you can do is try to delay the HVAC systems to all be like, increase raise the crazy things like raise the temperature in the morning, or so it's very, very hot in every room, and do it. And he told me, like, oh, how can I do that? Oh yeah, like the HVAC system is this, and then in order to raise this morning, you do that. Here is the program.
So is what you're just saying there is that if you go back in time, sophisticated code, sophisticated attack, small number of people who could perpetrate it, relatively small to the world, that now a larger audience can do more sophisticated things in a shorter amount of time. Is that
correct? If you were in Robert Lee put like a little at the end of the paper, he is okay, stage 2, and he has like a kind of like a bullseye, and he said this is very difficult and this is very easy, right? And there are things that are very difficult, like do attacks against like machines and like disable machines, and these have changed. Like now, attacks that were very difficult, if you were a manufacturing plant, you have no idea. As an attacker that knows IT and knows how to do penetrate a system, you don't know what to do in stage 2. Now you can. You have some traces of the network, you put it in ChatGPT, tell me what's up, and what are the worst things I can do here? And in that attack, what I am telling you, and like what's this new, like how do we defend against this? I think we need to be much more strict. As I talk about IDS is not working or working, sometimes it doesn't work. We cannot rely on the 1% of times things work or 2% of times things work. Things doesn't work, because that may be too much going into the future. I think we need like things like the cyber-informed engineering systems, where like you have your engineering system, so you know that attacks from outside can enter your system at the actual gateways or relief valves, or like what Andrew talks in his last book. We are facing, and this is not happening next year or in 2 years, but in 5 years, like creating payloads that are very sophisticated for OT systems is going to be really simple, and probably you can download it from the web on how to like do this like patterning like manufacturing plant. Because today I can start doing it. I mean, I can start creating these payloads. I have and I don't want to do it, but if I have a sandbox, which looks like, and maybe you will not be very accurate. Maybe you will not be able to increase the temperature, but you can be like much better than today. I mean, much better today doing these attacks to OT systems like rail networks. Rail networks, if you're an attacker and you end up in a signaling system, you don't know what to do. Well, now you know what to do, because trust me, if you touch ChatGPT, this is the trace. They tell you, oh, this is a like a signaling system made by this manufacturer, and what you're seeing is that, and then you're like, oh, okay, so what's the worst that can happen? And this is the thing about, you cannot ask ChatGPT to do malware, but you can ask her to do, what's the worst thing I can do if I control every computer in this system? Because she's okay with that. It's like, oh, you control every computer in the system, then you're the owner. Yeah, I'll tell you. This is what you can do. So it is quite interesting that this stage 2, I think, is one of the things people oversee. They see AI being used to create phishing attacks very well. But I think a stage 2 of the OT cyber kill chain is going to be modified AI, and we need to find ways to prevent that.
That's another, yeah, I'm glad you shared that. I think that's a pretty thought-provoking area for all of us to be paying closer attention to. So last but not least, just thinking about the things, all these projects that you touch, cloud, rail, AI, is that part of your role as the Director of Industrial IoT at Waterfall? Are you looking at and sort of what are all the areas and research and things that are happening? Is that part of it, or is that just still your personal interest area?
Well, now I'm a professor also here at the university. Going back to my old university, I'm a professor in like a master on cybersecurity in rail networks, collaborating with Brent and Adif and other operators here. But no, that's like, I am very curious in general. So I like to do many things apart of what I like. And I think that's another thing that maybe it's a nugget of knowledge. It's really good for cybersecurity people to understand that the more things you know from outside cybersecurity, the better you will be. And other thing is like cybersecurity is so useful to other things. I was a journalist and I was able to interview Tarantino and like Almodovar and like Bardem. And the only reason I was able to do it, was because I was a cybersecurity professional, because I was able to know more than the others. I mean, cybersecurity people, we have a lot to bring to the world, because we have a mentality that is very unique, because usually it's based on curiosity. So it's something we can, I think, like, I will ask other cybersecurity people to maybe try another field, because maybe they will be very successful in ways they don't know, because they see things in other ways. So what I can tell you is that, bringing different views and like knowing literature, or like bringing your views to the world is really good. And like, you can teach people more than cybersecurity, but also the mentality of like the curiosity that sometimes is difficult. Every kid today, what they ask me is like, oh, you do cybersecurity, can you help me hack this game? So I win that. All the kids, my daughter's friends, they come to me, it's like, hey, can you know what this thing, can I pass this state level? It's like, yeah, but first you need to understand how the wing works. Then we can put together like a plan on how to do it, and then we can execute. It's like, oh, that's too much. But the idea is there. It's the curiosity of like, first you have to understand how it works in order to defeat it. So this is something that is very interesting on how you, me, and others in this field think differently, think more with curiosity as a base.
Well, this has been super fascinating. All these interviews are so different, but this is, I must admit, been a pretty enjoyable one. I wish we could just go longer. Well, we're at sort of one of my favorite parts of doing these. I have borrowed something from a television show called the Pivot Questionnaire, and this was on inside the actor's studio for many years. It may still be. I really should look it up, but I used to watch back when James Lipton was the host, and he's passed on, but for decades he would interview all the famous actors and actresses, people like you mentioned earlier, and he would ask these same 10 questions, which he got from a French show. So I think this is more than 50 years old, and I have not changed a word of it. And just as a tip of my hat to those shows, if you want to finish with the Pivot Questionnaire, I'll start out.
Should.
Okay, let's do it. What is your favorite word?
Okay, so it's Calipedia in Spanish. Calipedia is the art of making beautiful children. And it's a word that I read in a book one time. And it's like a word that really nobody uses, but I think it's the most, and Calipedia sounds so beautiful. And like the meaning of like the art of making beautiful children, it's using alchemy, I guess. But it's just like this, forget about that part. I thought, and it's still in the dictionary in Spain, Calipedia. So I love that.
What is your least favorite word?
I could tell you why my least favorite word in the past. Today is delve, because AI uses all the time. Every time you see anything that has delve or in conclusion is made by AI. That is like a 95%, because delve was never used before, but delve is used in so many articles today that is like, and I hate that word. I don't know how it sounds. I don't know what uses it, but yeah, delve.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Curiosity, like learning things that are out of my comfort zone, I would say. Like I'm learning piano now, I'm learning things that are like things that you're not good at, I would say, that are like understand things that I would never thought that I could do that. That is really like emotionally important for me.
What turns you off?
Confrontation. I am very bad at confrontation, and that goes, this is like, you say, oh, it's good, it's like bad. You know, I am the worst negotiator in the world. You know, I went to Turkey recently to the bazaar, and I went out with like a million things I didn't need for $1 million. And I wanted to go there to negotiate. When I came back, it's like, how? Because, you know, like in order to negotiate, you need to avoid like to know how to confront somebody, and I'm very bad at confrontation. So confrontation turns me off, and I'm very bad.
What is your favorite curse word?
A F word, I guess. I cannot, and it's kind of funny because it's not even from my maternal language. I never say, and in Spain, in Spanish, because I went to the US so fast and like I don't know, sheltered, I never use curse words in Spanish. So my Spanish is a little bit too nice, you know, well, I guess I use F too much.
What sound or noise do you love?
I love the laugh of my daughter. That's the one. I just can't get enough of that. It's so cute.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Actually, like, if I have to be honest, I don't like music when I'm working. I mean, it's just when I work, people love to hear music when they work. I just don't like music. That sound is always, because I get focused on the music more and I just want silence.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would like to be a performer of an instrument. I started to do the piano during the pandemic, and I got pretty good because I've been self-taught, so I'm not bad. But I still don't understand how they do in concerts, and they all like go together, and the piano goes, and then this is still, because I've never played an instrument in my life. I thought I was very bad at music, which I think I'm pretty bad, but not as bad as I thought. It's something, so I would love to, is to perform in front of people and love me just because I play an instrument. That must be like, what a sensation. So yes, that.
What profession would you not like to do?
A profession I already done, which is being a journalist of the heart, or a journalist of like famous people, because it is the worst possible job. Like you really need to fight against all these people with cameras pushing you, and they're like cutthroats. If you like interview one person and they want to interview them, they will try to cut you off. Journalism is a profession very misunderstood, in particular when you have to fight against other journalists, because you have to be better than them. And it's a profession that involves a lot of confrontation. So that's a profession that I have friends that are journalists, and it's like, that's a profession I will never want to do. I tried, I failed miserably, and I will never want to do that.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Jesus, you have been so amazing in this life that you are granted 100 more lives. It's like,
oh, I love it. Well, thank you. I am just finishing up with Dr. Jesus Molina, Director of Industrial IoT at Waterfall Security Solutions, a man of many talents and great curiosity, and a longtime contributor to cybersecurity for more than 2 decades and practically his entire life. So thank you for all that you do, and staying as curious as you are for all of our benefit, for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Derek, for creating this repository of what all of us have as a background, because I think, as you say, sometimes our background and how we get here and what you have done is very unique, and more for people that work in OT cybersecurity. It's just like such a mix of interesting people, and it's always surprising. I was surprised when I found your podcast of like learning so many things about people I have talked 100 times. I'm like, oh my God, next time I talk with him, we're going to talk about this. So it's very, very interesting. And thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. And I'm very glad to add you to the to what I have joked as the pantheon of heroes. It's been, my experience has been what you just described. I've known many of the guests, not all. And even the ones I've known, I learned a ton of things I never knew before. And I've heard many people say, I've known so-and-so forever, and I didn't know they were into this or into that. And we all have come from so many backgrounds, especially I think in OT cybersecurity, so many interesting early steps, because you go back far enough, there's nobody who's a specialist in OT cyber. So everybody had to come from somewhere. And
so many characters too. So many characters.
Yeah.
Like, that's surprising. It's like, wow, these people, it's a very unique field. And
it is. Glad. Well, thank you, Jesus, and take care and be well, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. If not before, maybe that's S4.
Likewise, I'll see you in S4 for sure. If not.
All right.
Thank you so much, Derek. Bye.
Good night.
Hi, everyone. This is Derek Harp, the founder and chairman of the Control Systems Cybersecurity Association International, or as we call it, just CSA. CSA is a 501c6 nonprofit workforce development association dedicated to helping grow, support, and sustain the professionals charged with the cybersecurity of control systems. We're specifically talking about those systems that have pumps and valves and actuators, real cyber to physical moving parts, and control nearly every aspect of our modern connected industries. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. It is my hope you find it inspirational or motivating or revealing or informative, and perhaps at times even a little entertaining. Take care and be well.